Hey YouTube, so I'm going to go over real quick some of the equipment that I'm using and some of the equipment that you would need if you plan on coating a firearm in KG Gun Kote. We'll start off from the left to the right. The first group over here is mostly KG's products. We've got the KG 2400 Gun Kote. I've got two cans of it. I've got an 8-ounce can of flat dark earth and an 8-ounce can of foliage green. I've also got some of their KFOS, which is sort of a pre-treatment or primer, if you will. And then I've got some of their KG3 degreaser. I've read a lot of guys use other products to degrease, brake cleaner, acetone. I've also got a can of acetone that I kind of pre-degrease before I hit it with that stuff. But I decided to go mostly with KG's products because it's what they recommend, and it was only a few bucks more than what a can of brake cleaner would have cost me. Personal protection equipment, I've got some gloves here. I've got a whole box of gloves. I go through them pretty quickly. Air compressor blow gun attachment. You're going to be wanting to blow off any leftover degreasing agents or sandblasting media, and I'll go over sandblasting here in just a second. Another part of the personal protection equipment that's really important is a respirator. Everything that you're using can cause some serious health issues, from the gun coat itself, the KFOS, as well as sandblasting. You don't want to be breathing any of that crap in and getting in your lungs. So a good respirator is really important. Here I've got a Posh H airbrush. It's a single action only airbrush, and I recommend the single action simply because it's ease of use and it's steady. Once you set the rate of flow out of the nozzle, every time you push that little button or pull a little trigger, it's the same amount of paint and the same amount of airflow that's coming out every time. So it takes out a lot of the user air when you're doing something like this. I've got a set of airbrush cleaning brushes. Those definitely come in handy when you're cleaning up. This guy right back here is a regulator and a moisture trap, which has really come in handy because the regulator on my compressor is not all that reliable. And then I've got a couple bottles for the airbrush itself, one of which has some of the KFOS in it that I was using just last night, in fact. An airbrush hose. You definitely want to invest in one of the nicer braided airbrush hoses. The little skinny black tubing ones don't really hold up that well. And over here is what I've got to hang all my pieces that I'm airbrushing. I've got safety wire and safety wire pliers, and pretty much what I'm doing is right above me here I've got just a piece of wire shelving unit that I have hung between two little step ladders, and it's working really well. Actually, I'll unclip here and show you. It's just shelving unit hung between a couple of step ladders, and I'm kind of using this little shelf on the step ladder as a little staging area for everything I'm doing. And the background here is my workbench, reloading bench. In fact, you can see I've got my single stage lead press mostly covered up. It was kind of hard to cover up the handle, but I'm not really worried about it. So this is pretty much everything you're going to need. You're also going to need a way to sandblast whatever you're coating. And what I'm doing with that, I don't have a blast cabinet or anything like that, but what I did was I went to Harbor Freight and got one of their little hopper-fed sandblasters for 30 bucks. And it's worked really well so far. There'll be some footage of me doing the sandblasting with that sandblaster, so I don't have it here, but I'll show you that in a minute. And I pretty much just took everything outside, I actually wore old motorcycle gloves of mine to protect my hands. I wore my respirator, wore some eye goggles, and I went to town. And it actually took me less time than I thought it would, and a lot less headache than I thought it would to get everything sandblasted. So the sandblasting was way easier than I thought it would be, mostly because you don't really have to entirely remove the finish when you're using KG Gun Kote. You just have to remove any Teflon finish that might be there and rough up the surface just as you would with, like, if you were painting a car or whatever, you'd use like a wet sand. This sandblasting is what you use to texture properly for the KG Gun Kote. So yeah, this is what I'm working with right now, and I'll get some footage of me spraying the KG Gun Kote and spraying the KFOS. And the way it works basically is you heat up whatever you're going to spray to about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, that's after you degrease it. You pull that out of the oven, hang it or mount it however you're going to spray it. You spray it down with the KG KFOS, and then you take it back into your oven. You preheat it once again to 120 degrees or so. You bring it back out, and then you're ready to gun coat. And once you hit it with the gun coat, it's pretty cool. It dries almost instantly. Once you start spraying, it doesn't stay wet for very long at all. And the cool part about KG Gun Kote is that you don't need to do multiple coats or multiple layers as you would with a product like Duracoat. Once you achieve full color with the KG Gun Kote, you're done. You're ready to bake it at 325 degrees for an hour or so, and that's it. You're ready to rock. It goes on very thin. It's very easy to apply. In fact, just with about 45 minutes of practice with my airbrush, with just some regular old airbrush paint, I was able to get everything ready to rock. And then my first attempt with an H&K magazine in the foliage green went swimmingly. It was way easier than I thought it would be, and it was actually kind of fun. I figured I'd screw something up and get some crazy runs on the paint or mad orange peel or something like that, but none of that happened, and I was able to get it knocked out really quickly. So yeah, here's kind of a preview of the process, and I'll get more in depth as far as other stuff. I'll show you some degreasing, some sandblasting, some spraying. I don't know if I'll be using this camera here to show the spraying because I don't want to get the lens coated in any kind of paint, so it might not be quite as high quality, but this is what we're working with, and I'm going to get everything prepped and ready to rock and go from there. So here's the sandblasting phase of my gun coating project, and it's a pretty simple setup. What I've got here, I've just got a Rubbermaid tub, and mostly all I'm really trying to do is catch as much of the media as I can so I don't make a mess in the back of my garage here. I've got an inexpensive sandblasting gun from Harbor Freight. Holds 21 ounces of media, and the media I'm using is aluminum oxide, 120 grit, and you got a little control over here that will control the amount of media that you let flow through the nozzle. Hooked up to my air compressor, and then back here I've just got all the parts that I'm going to be sandblasting. And the idea of sandblasting the parts that you're going to gun coat isn't so much to remove all the finish that is there, but only to remove any possible Teflon that's there, and to texturize the part that you're going to be gun coating. So you don't need to go super crazy, super heavy with the sandblasting, just enough to remove any possible Teflon and get a good texture over the whole piece of metal that you're going to be spraying. It's kind of like how you would wet sand something before painting it in the automotive industry or whatever, but you're just using a sandblast gun to give it a specific texture that the paint requires to adhere. So I'm gonna sandblast some stuff. Any steel that I'm doing it at about 60-70 psi. Any aluminum that I'm doing at around 30 to 40 psi. KG Industries recommends about 20 psi, but I think because of the gun that I'm using, rather than a regular sandblasting setup, the 20 psi doesn't really work that well, and it kind of just gently throws the media at the metal. So between 30 and 40 psi is really what's working. So I'll sandblast some stuff, show you, and we'll move on from there. Alright guys, so here's all of my sandblasted parts that I've got done today. It's pretty much everything sans the receiver extension or the buffer tube. I actually did that last night when I was doing the H&K magazine, and I got it sandblasted and I coated it down in some KFOS as well. So pretty much everything here is ready to be preheated, and then I'm going to spray it with KFOS, and then I'm going to reheat it and then apply the KG Gun Kote. Now, what I'm really trying hard to do is not get in a rush and just spray everything. I'm going to separate out the parts by what color they're going to be, and then go from there. For instance, the receivers are going to be flat dark earth, whereas the barrel and some of the smaller parts are going to be in foliage green. So I'm probably going to start with the smaller foliage green parts, and then work up to the larger pieces like the barrel that's going to be foliage green. And then once I'm done with those, I'm going to go on and do the receivers in the flat dark earth. And the reason I want to do the smaller parts first is to get a little bit more practice with the airbrush, and make sure I'm all squared away and dialed in with that. So that's what we've got so far. And of course, while I'm doing this, I'm going to be degreasing, because that's one of the biggest mishaps that people have when it comes to painting, is not degreasing enough. So keep watching. Alright, so we're going to start off spraying this HK mag. It's heated and ready to go.
Damn it, spotted. Alright, so I hope you can hear me. I'm not going to take my mask off just yet, but the flat dark earth went on definitely not as easy as the foliage green. It took a lot more to cover, and for some reason my airbrush was throwing little spots of paint. But so it's not gonna, there's gonna be a couple spots on there that aren't perfect, which is fine. Not a big deal, it's just a mag. But it definitely took a lot more to cover that mag than it did with the foliage green. But, so yeah, that's pretty much the airbrush technique I've been using. Just nice and smooth and steady. That was a heavier application than what I was doing with the foliage green, because I guess it blend better with the colors of what I was spraying it on. But we'll bake this and see how it turns out.
Alright guys, so here's the results of my gun coat project. Everything went pretty well. The only thing I had problems with was spraying the flat dark earth color. It didn't go on nearly as easy as the foliage green. The foliage green covered really well, and I think that's due in part to the fact that it's a dark color coating another dark color, whereas the flat dark earth is a little bit lighter and took more to cover. But it wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. I've actually tried to paint a motorcycle before, back when I was racing, and that was a huge failure. I really sucked at using an HVLP gun and doing everything properly with that. But the airbrush worked really well. I had a couple of spotting issues, and I'll see if I can see if it'll show up here on the camera. Maybe not. Oh, yep, there we go. That my airbrush was throwing big globs of paint every once in a while, and that was the result, which isn't bad. You have to have it in a specific light to be able to see it. As you can tell, just looking at the lower receiver, you can't really see them. They're not super standoutish, and you know, for a first time using the product, I really don't think it's that big a deal. I did manage to kind of figure out the right nozzles and the right amount of air to use right towards the end when I was finishing to stop that from happening. But it's not a big deal. One of the things that is both good and bad about the gun coat is that once you cure it in the oven, solvents won't take it off. So I can't dip the stuff in acetone or something like that and remove the finish. If I want to remove the finish and try again, I've got to sandblast everything and then redo the entire process. Which for little spots like that, or like on this guy, see if we can get that in good light. Come on, focus. Might be a little hard to see, but it's a little thin right here on the back side of my brass deflector. Once again, you know, it kind of stinks that it happened, but it's not that big a deal. I'll live with it. I plan on shooting the living hell out of this gun, and I plan on beating it up a little bit. So if it gets more dinged up, I'm not really going to worry about it. But I'll show you some of the other pieces I got done here. Here's my LMT rear buis. I think this thing turned out really good. I like the two-tone. Here's Magpul bad lever. And the foliage green isn't quite as foliage as I thought it would be. It's kind of a mix between OD green and foliage green. It's like a extra dark foliage green. Actually, I've got so here's a Magpul Myad grip in foliage green, and here's a HK416 mag, or a steel mag, in foliage green. And you can see that it's definitely a little bit darker, which is fine by me. I don't really care. I'm not a big stickler that everything on my gun must match. In fact, that's part of the reason why I did this, is because I didn't want an all-black gun. I didn't want an all-matching gun. I wanted something a little bit different. So I kind of came up with this idea after browsing the internet a little bit, and I saw a menagerie of different guys' builds. So here's the ejection port cover. It's actually not installed, it's just kind of sitting on there, but that's just to give you an idea of what the gun's going to look like. Anything that was steel definitely coated easier than anything that was aluminum. So here's my bolt and carrier in foliage. I was originally going to do this in flat dark earth, but since the flat dark earth was kind of being a pain to coat at the time, I went with the foliage, and I'm really happy I did that. It's going to look pretty cool, both when it's cycling and when it's just in the gun. I'll give you an idea of what it's going to look like. So everything turned out pretty well. The flat dark earth actually matched up with the Troy flat dark earth pretty well. The Troy color is just a little darker and a little browner than KG Industries flat dark earth. So I think everything turned out really well. I got a bunch of, I'll show you all the little small bits that I got there. It all turned out really well. My hanging method for spraying turned out pretty well. It did manage to muck up at some spots where where the safety wire was. So as you can see there, it kind of rubbed off a little bit, but once again, not a big deal. I'm not gonna cry about it. I'm just gonna use it. Yeah, it was a fun project. I really liked it. One thing to note is that everything I read on the internet said when you bake it, it stinks to high heaven. And I don't know if my nose just wasn't working or what, but it really didn't smell that bad. I had all my windows open and I had several fans going just to make sure it was blowing everything out, but it really didn't smell bad at all. Yeah. I'm excited to get this thing together and run it and see how well this stuff holds up. It's supposed to be one of the tougher finishes out there. The flat dark earth color here is actually used by the U.S. military on some of their weapons. It's their official choice for coloration. So we'll see how it holds up, and we'll see what it does. And I'll make a video of me building everything, putting everything together, and we'll go from there. So thanks for watching, guys. Sorry if there was any crappy camera work. I'm working all by my onesies, and it's kind of tough. Shooting in the garage was tough because I was trying to get everything done, and it was really hot. Even at night, it was super hot in my garage, and it wasn't exactly easy to do everything at once, especially because you had to spray the gun coat onto the metal while it was still warm from the oven. So yeah, thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Please subscribe if you want to see the upcoming build